The small research station sat quietly on the edge of a purple forest. Inside, scientists worked at their computers and studied samples from the strange new planet. This world was far from Earth, so far that the sun looked like just another star in the sky. The planet had a name that was hard to remember, so everyone just called it K442. 7-year-old Lucas lived at the station with his mother. His mom was a scientist who studied alien plants and animals. Lucas missed his friends back on Earth, but he tried to make the best of things. He spent his days exploring the halls of the station and watching the alien world through the big windows. The station had a special room with walls made of super strong, clear material. It was called the Observation Dome. Lucas loved this room because he could see the whole forest from there. The trees were not like Earth trees. They had purple leaves that moved even when there was no wind. Strange flowers grew everywhere, and they seemed to glow softly in the afternoon light. One afternoon, Lucas was sitting in the observation dome doing his homework. Math problems were boring, so he kept looking up at the forest. That was when he saw something move between the trees. It was big, really big. Lucas put down his pencil and moved closer to the window. A creature stepped out from the shadows. Lucas had never seen anything like it. The creature was huge, much bigger than any animal from Earth. It walked on 6 legs, and its body was covered in hard plates that looked like armor. The plates changed color as the creature moved, shifting from dark purple to black. But what really caught Lucas's attention were the eyes. The creature had 4 eyes, 2 on each side of its head. They glowed with a warm amber color. Those eyes looked smart, like the creature was thinking about something. The creature turned its head and looked straight at Lucas. Lucas felt his heart beat faster, but he was not scared. He was excited. He had wanted to see the animals that lived on this planet for so long. His mom had pictures and videos, but seeing one in real life was different. It was amazing. The creature tilted its head to one side, just like a dog would do when it was confused or curious. Lucas smiled. Without thinking, he raised his hand and waved. He did not expect anything to happen. But then the creature lifted one of its front legs and moved it back and forth. It was waving back. Lucas laughed with delight. The sound echoed in the quiet dome. The creature seemed to like the sound because it moved closer to the window. Now Lucas could see how truly massive it was. The creature's head was bigger than Lucas's whole body. But those amber eyes looked gentle, not mean or scary. For the next 10 minutes, Lucas and the creature just looked at each other. Lucas tried waving again, and the creature copied him. Lucas put both hands on the window, and the creature placed one of its big legs against the glass on the other side. The leg was so big that it covered the space where both of Lucas's hands were. When dinner time came, Lucas ran to find his mother. She was in her lab, looking at plant samples under a microscope. Lucas was talking so fast that his words all ran together. He told her about the creature, about how big it was, about the 4 glowing eyes, about how it waved back at him. His mother listened with a patient smile. She thought Lucas had imagined it. The station's security system watched the whole area around the building. If a large animal had come close, the alarms would have gone off. She checked the computer, but there was nothing. No alerts, no warnings, no recordings of any large creature. Lucas felt disappointed that his mom did not believe him. But he knew what he had seen. It was real. That night, as he lay in his bed, he thought about the creature. He decided that if it came back tomorrow, he would be ready. He would prove that it was real. The next day, Lucas waited in the observation dome right after lunch. He brought his tablet computer with him, the one he used for school. He had drawing programs on it. If the creature came back, he would take pictures and make drawings. Then his mom would have to believe him. At exactly 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the creature appeared again. It came from the same spot in the forest, walking slowly and carefully. When it reached the clearing near the window, it sat down on its back legs. The way it moved was graceful, even though it was so big. Lucas quickly took several pictures with his tablet. Then he opened his drawing program. He started to sketch the creature, using his finger on the screen. He was not a great artist, but he did his best. He drew the 6 legs, the armored body, and the 4 glowing eyes. When he finished, he held the tablet up to show the creature. The creature leaned forward, those 4 eyes focusing on the screen. Its head moved slightly as it studied the drawing. Then it made a sound, a deep rumbling that Lucas could feel through the floor. It almost sounded like the creature was pleased. Lucas started drawing other things. He drew his mom, the station, the purple trees outside. Each time the creature watched carefully. Sometimes it would tilt its head or make that rumbling sound. Lucas felt like they were having a conversation, even though they could not speak to each other. After about an hour, the creature stood up. It looked at Lucas one more time, then turned and walked back into the forest. Lucas watched until it disappeared among the purple trees. He felt sad to see it go, but he had a feeling it would come back. That evening, Lucas showed his mom the pictures on his tablet. Her smile disappeared when she saw them. She looked shocked. She grabbed the tablet and looked at the images more carefully. Then she started typing quickly on her computer, checking the station's cameras and sensors. The creature was real. Somehow it had gotten close to the station without setting off any alarms. That should have been impossible. Lucas's mom looked worried, but Lucas just felt excited. He had a new friend, even if that friend was a giant alien creature. He decided to give it a name. He would call it Shadow because it seemed to appear and disappear like a shadow. What Lucas did not know was that his new friend was not just any creature. Far away in a place where aliens from many different worlds met to talk and make decisions, computers were starting to send out warnings. Those computers had detected something that scared them. They had found a creature that most aliens feared more than anything else in the galaxy, and that creature was spending time with a human child. In a place very far from the research station, in a huge building floating in space, an alien named Krell was having a very bad day. Krell looked nothing like a human. He was tall and thin, with 4 eyes that could see in different directions at the same time. His skin was blue and covered with small scales that changed color when he was upset. Right now, those scales were flashing red. Krell worked for something called the Galactic Council. This was a group where aliens from many different planets met to solve problems and make rules. His job was to watch for dangers and warn everyone when something bad might happen. Today, the computers were telling him about a very big danger. On the big screen in front of him, Krell watched videos from the human research station. He watched Lucas and Shadow meeting for the first time. He watched them wave at each other. He watched Lucas draw pictures while Shadow watched. Every time he saw the videos, Krell felt more worried. Standing next to Krell was his assistant, Syrinx. Syrinx was even more nervous than Krell. Syrinx belonged to a race that looked like large insects. When he was scared, his wings would buzz and his antennae would shake. Right now, both were happening. The creature in the video was called a Vexnar. Most aliens in the galaxy were terrified of the Vexnar. There were good reasons for this fear. Long ago, the Vexnar had destroyed entire colonies. 17 different alien species had gone extinct because of them. Whole planets had been evacuated when a Vexnar was spotted nearby. The rules for dealing with Vexnar were simple and clear. If you see one, run away as fast as you can. Call for military help. Set up a safe zone at least 50 kilometers away. If the Vexnar shows any sign of aggression, destroy it from space with big weapons. These rules had been written after many terrible experiences. But the humans were not following the rules. Not even close. They had let a Vexnar come right up to their station. They had let it stay there for hours. Worst of all, they had let one of their children play with it. This was crazy. This was dangerous. This was going to end badly. Krell had sent messages to the human government 3 days ago. He had explained the danger. He had told them about the rules. He had warned them that people would die if they did not evacuate immediately. The human response had confused him. They had thanked him for the information. They had asked for more data about Vexnar behavior. Then they had said they would continue to watch the situation. Continue to watch. As if this was some kind of science experiment. As if the creature was not one of the most dangerous predators in the known galaxy. Krell did not understand humans at all. Back on the planet, Lucas had settled into a nice routine with Shadow. Every day at 2 o'clock, he would go to the observation dome. 3 minutes later, Shadow would come out of the forest. They would spend the next hour or two together, separated only by the clear wall. Lucas brought different things to show Shadow. He brought a ball that lit up when you threw it. Shadow's 4 eyes would follow the ball very carefully as it bounced around. Lucas brought a music player. When he played songs, Shadow would move its head slightly as if it liked the sound. Lucas brought books with pictures of Earth animals. Shadow looked at every picture with great interest. The thing that surprised Lucas most was how gentle Shadow was. When the creature moved, it was always careful. It never made sudden movements that might scare Lucas. When it placed its leg against the window, it did so slowly and softly. Shadow seemed to understand that Lucas was small and fragile. Lucas's mother had stopped trying to pretend the creature was not real. After seeing the pictures and checking the cameras herself, she had to accept the truth. A massive alien predator was visiting her son every single day. She should have been terrified. She should have called for evacuation. But something made her pause. As a scientist, Helen had spent her whole life studying animals and how they behaved. She knew what aggressive behavior looked like. She knew the signs of a predator getting ready to attack. Shadow showed none of those signs. Instead, Shadow acted curious, patient, and careful. The creature seemed to be trying very hard not to frighten them. When the message came from the Galactic Council, Helen read it carefully. They sent her files about the Vexnar. They told her about the destroyed colonies and extinct species. They warned her that she was putting everyone in danger. But Helen was a good scientist. She did not just read what they told her. She dug deeper into the data. What she found was interesting. Yes, the Vexnar had attacked alien settlements, but Helen noticed something that others had missed. Every single attack had happened after the aliens had done something first. In some cases, scientists had tried to capture young Vexnar for study. In other cases, settlers had built colonies right in the middle of Vexnar breeding grounds. In still other cases, military ships had fired first and asked questions later. The Vexnar had never started a fight. They had only responded when threatened. Helen found this pattern repeated again and again in the old records. The Vexnar were dangerous, yes, but they were not the mindless monsters that everyone believed them to be. Helen wrote a report about what she had found. She sent it to the Galactic Council with a simple message. Maybe the problem was not the Vexnar. Maybe the problem was that everyone was too scared to try talking to them peacefully. This message made Krell even more upset. His scales turned from red to orange, which meant he was getting angry now instead of just worried. Humans had been part of the Galactic Council for only a few years. They were still new to space travel and meeting other species. They did not understand how things worked. They did not respect the rules that had been written in blood. Krell called a meeting with other council members. He showed them the videos of Lucas and Shadow. He read them Helen's report. He asked them what they should do. Should they force the humans to evacuate? Should they send military ships to protect the station? Should they eliminate the Vexnar before it could hurt anyone? The council members argued for hours. Some wanted to follow the old rules. Others were curious about what the humans had discovered. A few even wondered if maybe, just maybe, the humans were right. Perhaps fear had been controlling everyone's decisions for too long. While the adults argued in space, Lucas and Shadow continued their friendship on the planet below. Lucas had started teaching Shadow simple games. They played a version of hide and seek, where Lucas would move to different parts of the dome and Shadow would track where he went. They played pattern games with colored blocks that Lucas would arrange in different orders. What amazed everyone watching was how smart Shadow was. The creature learned games quickly. After just a few tries, Shadow could predict what pattern Lucas would make next. Shadow even started making its own patterns using rocks and plants from the forest. The patterns were beautiful and complex. One afternoon, Lucas tried something new. He had been learning to count in his math class. He held up fingers and said numbers. 1 finger, 1. 2 fingers, 2. 3 fingers, 3. Shadow watched very carefully. Then Shadow did something that made Lucas gasp with excitement. The creature gathered objects from nearby. When Lucas held up 1 finger, Shadow placed 1 rock by the window. When Lucas held up 2 fingers, Shadow placed 2 branches by the window. When Lucas held up 3 fingers, Shadow arranged 3 glowing flowers in a row. Shadow was counting. The creature understood numbers. Lucas ran to get his mother. Helen came to the observation dome and watched as Lucas and Shadow repeated the counting game. She recorded everything on her tablet. This was incredible. This changed everything. The Vexnar were not just smart predators. They had real intelligence. They could learn and understand complex ideas. Helen sent the new videos to the Galactic Council immediately. This time her message was more urgent. They needed to stop thinking of the Vexnar as monsters. They needed to start thinking of them as people. And people could be talked to, reasoned with, and understood. The question was whether the council was ready to change its mind after so many. The council chambers were full of noise. Representatives from 47 different alien species had gathered for an emergency meeting. The huge room was designed to hold all kinds of aliens. Some breathed different gases, so they sat in special sealed containers. Some were very large, others were very small. Some had many legs, some had none. But today they all had one thing in common. They were all worried about the same problem. Ambassador Patricia Green stood at the human section of the chamber. She was Lucas's aunt, though most people in the room did not know that yet. Patricia was a calm person who did not get upset easily. She had short dark hair and wore a simple gray suit. Compared to the bright colors and fancy clothes of the other ambassadors, she looked plain. But her eyes were sharp and she missed nothing. Krell called the meeting to order. His voice boomed through the chamber's speakers, translated into dozens of different languages at once. The center of the room lit up with a hologram. Everyone could see the images from the research station. They saw Shadow emerging from the forest. They saw little Lucas pressing his hands against the window. They saw the two of them playing together. Gasps and shocked sounds filled the room. Many of the aliens had never seen a Vexnar this close. Some of them had lost friends or family to Vexnar attacks in the past. Seeing one so close to a child made them very upset. An alien from a group called the Vor Collective jumped up from his seat. The Vor looked like a large crab with 6 legs and 2 big claws. His species had lost an entire planet to the Vexnar 30 years ago. Through his translator, everyone heard his angry words. "This is madness. The humans are letting their child play with a killer. We cannot allow this to continue. The child will die and it will be our fault for not stopping it." Many others agreed with him. Their voices mixed together in a chorus of concern and fear. Ambassador Green waited patiently for the noise to die down. When it was finally quiet enough to speak, she stepped forward. "I respect everyone's concerns," she said clearly, "but I must point out that nothing bad has happened. The Vexnar has had many chances to attack our station. It has not done so. It comes every day and then leaves peacefully. My question is this, why?" Krell's scales flashed orange. "Because it is studying you," he answered. "The Vexnar are not stupid animals. They are clever hunters. This creature is learning about your station. It is finding your weak points. When it knows enough, it will attack." Ambassador Green shook her head. "Or perhaps it is curious. Perhaps it wants to communicate. I have read all the historical records about Vexnar encounters. In every single case, there was a threat first. Someone tried to capture them. Someone invaded their territory. Someone shot at them first. Has anyone in this room ever tried to make peaceful contact with a Vexnar?" The silence that followed was heavy. No one had an answer. Another alien spoke up. She was from the Zephyr Accord, and her voice sounded like wind chimes. "Even if you are right, the risk is too great. One mistake could mean death. The rules exist to keep people safe." "I understand," Ambassador Green replied. "But I want to suggest something different. Instead of following the old rules, let us try something new. Let us allow this peaceful contact to continue. We can watch everything very carefully. If anything goes wrong, we can evacuate immediately. But if I am right, we might learn something important about the Vexnar. We might discover that they are not monsters after all." The Vor representative spoke again, his claws clicking together in agitation. "And if you are wrong? If the child dies? Are you willing to accept that responsibility?" Patricia Green looked directly at him. She took a deep breath before speaking. "That child's name is Lucas. He is my sister's son. He is my nephew. So yes, I understand exactly what is at risk. I know what could go wrong. But I also believe that fear has controlled our decisions for too long. Humans have learned hard lessons about assuming things. We have learned that the universe is stranger and more wonderful than we expect. Shadow, that is what Lucas calls the creature, has chosen peace over violence. I think we should honor that choice." The room erupted in surprise sounds. An ambassador willing to risk her own family was something none of them had expected. Some aliens looked impressed. Others looked shocked. A few looked like they thought Patricia was crazy. Krell raised his hand for silence. After a long moment, he spoke. "The human delegation asked for 30 days. During this time, we will watch everything that happens. All species who have dealt with Vexnar in the past can review the recordings. If the creature shows any sign of aggression, we will evacuate the humans immediately. All in favor of this plan?" The vote took a long time. Some aliens voted yes right away. Some voted no immediately. Many were not sure what to do, so they did not vote at all. But in the end, there were just enough yes votes for the plan to pass. The humans would have their 30 days. After the meeting ended, many of the aliens left quickly. They did not want to stay and talk. But Krell walked over to where Ambassador Green was standing. His scales had turned to a worried purple color. "I hope you are right about this," he said quietly. "For your nephew's sake and for the reputation of humanity in this council." Patricia smiled, though her eyes were serious. "Ambassador Krell, my species has a long history of being absolutely sure about things. We were wrong more often than we were right. We have learned to question our assumptions. Shadow has chosen to visit Lucas peacefully every single day. The creature has been gentle and careful. I believe we should trust that behavior rather than old fears." Krell looked at her for a long moment. Then he said something that surprised her. "I hope your species' optimism is not just foolishness, but I admit, I am curious to see what happens. Your people are still new to the galaxy. Perhaps that gives you a different perspective. Perhaps you can see things we have become too old and tired to notice." Back on the research station, Lucas had no idea that so many aliens were arguing about him and Shadow. He was too busy teaching his friend a new game. He had found a puzzle in his room, one with large colored pieces that fit together. He was showing Shadow how the pieces connected. Shadow watched with intense focus. After Lucas showed how 3 pieces fit together, Shadow went to the edge of the forest. The creature came back with flat stones. Shadow arranged the stones in the same pattern that Lucas had made with the puzzle pieces. The colors were different, but the shape was exactly the same. Lucas clapped his hands with joy. Shadow's eyes seemed to glow brighter, and the creature made that deep rumbling sound that Lucas had learned meant happiness. They spent the rest of the afternoon making patterns together. Lucas would create something, then Shadow would copy it. Then Shadow would create something, and Lucas would try to copy it with his puzzle pieces. Helen watched from nearby, recording everything. She sent the videos to the council with detailed notes about what she was observing. Shadow was not just intelligent. The creature was actively trying to communicate. It was learning human concepts and teaching Lucas about Vexenar concepts in return. That night, as Helen tucked Lucas into bed, he asked her a question. "Mom, do you think Shadow has a family? Does Shadow have a mom and dad too?" Helen thought about this carefully. "I think Shadow probably does have a family," she answered. "All creatures have families of some kind. Maybe Shadow has children. Maybe Shadow is teaching them about us just like Shadow is learning from you." Lucas smiled at this idea. "Then I hope Shadow's family is nice, just like Shadow is nice to me. Good night, Mom." As Helen turned off the light, she thought about her son's simple wisdom. A 7-year-old child could see past the fear and recognize a friend. Maybe that was what the galaxy needed. Not more weapons or stricter rules, but more people willing to see past their assumptions and just say hello. 3 weeks had passed since the council gave permission for the experiment to continue. The research station was now the most watched place in the galaxy. New satellites surrounded the planet. Cameras covered every angle. Scientists from dozens of different species studied every second of interaction between Lucas and Shadow. Lucas did not think about all the people watching. For him, each afternoon with Shadow was just fun. They had moved beyond simple games now. Lucas was trying to teach Shadow about reading. He would show the creature words on his tablet and then point to the objects the words described. Tree, rock, flower, sky. Shadow paid very close attention to everything. The creature would look at the word, then at the object, then back at the word. After seeing a word several times, Shadow would rumble in recognition when Lucas showed it again. The scientists watching were amazed. Shadow was learning to read human writing. But something even more incredible happened on day 17. Lucas had been showing Shadow pictures of people. He showed pictures of his mother, his father who was still on Earth, and his Aunt Patricia. When he came to a picture of himself, Lucas pointed at it and said his name. Lucas. Shadow suddenly stood up very tall. The creature placed one of its front legs against its chest, right where a human would put their hand over their heart. Then Shadow made a sound unlike any it had made before. It was not a rumble or a growl. It was a series of tones and notes that seemed almost like music. The sound made the window vibrate. Lucas's mouth fell open in surprise. He pointed at Shadow with a shaking finger. "Is that your name? Your real name?" Shadow repeated the sound. Then the creature pointed one leg at Lucas and tried to make a sound like his name. It came out wrong because Shadow's mouth was shaped differently than a human mouth. But the intention was clear. Shadow was trying to speak Lucas's name. Shadow was trying to talk to him. Lucas started to cry, but he was smiling at the same time. He put his hand against the window. Shadow placed its leg against the other side, matching where Lucas's hand was. They stayed like that for several minutes, just looking at each other. Helen had been watching from her computer station. When she saw what happened, she immediately sent the recording to every scientist who was studying the situation. Within minutes, her communication system was flooded with messages. Language experts wanted more recordings. Behaviorists wanted to analyze every detail. Military officers wanted to know if this changed the threat assessment. The most important message came from a team of alien linguists. They had been studying every sound Shadow had ever made. They had compared these sounds with recordings of other Vexnar from long ago, from before all the conflicts had started. Their conclusion was shocking. The Vexnar had a complex language. This was not just communication like when animals warn each other of danger. This was real language with grammar and structure. The Vexnar could express abstract ideas. They could describe things that were not present. They could talk about the past and the future. They had everything needed for true communication. The report from the linguists changed everything. If the Vexnar had language, that meant they had culture. If they had culture, they were not just animals. They were people, and for decades the galaxy had been treating them like monsters, shooting them on sight, destroying their homes, driving them to extinction. Ambassador Patricia Green called for another emergency council meeting. This time, when she stood before the assembly, the mood was different. The aliens were not angry or scared now. They were uncomfortable. They were starting to realize what they had done. Patricia played the recording of Shadow speaking its name. The chamber was completely silent as they watched. When it finished, Patricia spoke quietly but firmly. "We have made a terrible mistake. For years we have been afraid of the Vexnar. We killed them because we thought they were monsters. But they were trying to talk to us. They were trying to communicate. We just never listened." The Vor representative, who had been so angry at the last meeting, said nothing. His large claws were still. Many other aliens shifted in their seats, looking uncomfortable. Finally, Krell spoke. His scales were a deep blue, a color that meant sadness. "What the ambassador says is true. We created protocols based on fear and incomplete information. A human child has accomplished what our militaries could not. He has opened a dialogue. The question now is what we do with this knowledge." An alien from a species that looked like walking crystals spoke up. "We must try to make things right. We must reach out to the Vexnar and apologize. We must try to build peace, but how?" Another alien asked. "Most Vexnar run from us or attack when we get near. They have learned to fear us." "Can you blame them?" Patricia had an answer ready. "We use the same method that worked on Kepler 442b. We send people who approach with open hands, not weapons. We send children if their parents volunteer. We show the Vexnar that we mean no harm. It will take time, but it is possible. Shadow has proven that." The debate went on for hours. But slowly a plan began to form. The galaxy would reach out to the Vexnar. They would try to build bridges instead of walls. They would try to communicate instead of attack. It would be hard and it would take years. But it was the right thing to do. Back on the planet, Lucas and Shadow continued their friendship, unaware of the big changes they had started. Lucas had begun learning some of the sounds that Shadow made. He could not make them perfectly because his mouth was different, but Shadow seemed to understand what he was trying to say. Shadow also started teaching Lucas about the forest. The creature would bring different plants and show them to Lucas. Shadow would make certain sounds and gestures. Slowly, Lucas began to understand. This plant was food. That one was medicine. This tree was very old and important. That flower only bloomed once a year. One afternoon, Shadow brought something very special. It was a small carving made from stone. The carving showed a Vexnar and what looked like a smaller Vexnar standing together. Shadow showed it to Lucas, then made a gentle sound. Lucas understood. This was Shadow's family. Shadow had a child. Lucas smiled and ran to get his tablet. He showed Shadow pictures of his own family. His mom, his dad, his Aunt Patricia. Shadow looked at each picture carefully, making soft sounds. The two of them were sharing their lives with each other. They were becoming real friends. Helen watched this exchange and felt her eyes get wet. She was witnessing something beautiful. Two completely different species, separated by millions of years of evolution, finding common ground. They both had families. They both felt love. They both wanted to connect with others. These were not alien concepts. They were universal. That evening, Helen wrote in her research journal, "Today I realized something important. We have been asking the wrong question all along. We kept asking why the Vexnar were aggressive. But we should have been asking why we assumed they were monsters in the first place. We saw creatures that looked scary, and we never looked deeper. We never tried to understand. A 7-year-old child did what trained scientists and military commanders could not. He looked past the surface and saw a person. The next morning, Helen received a message from the council. They wanted to send a team of diplomats and scientists to the station. They wanted to learn from Shadow. They wanted to understand how to communicate with the Vexnar properly. Helen smiled as she read the message. Change was coming. Real change. And it had all started with a little boy who decided to wave at a stranger in the forest. 3 months had passed since Lucas first waved at Shadow through the window. The research station had changed completely. It was no longer just a place for studying plants and rocks. Now it was the first embassy between humans and Vexnar. Diplomats and scientists from across the galaxy came to visit and learn. Shadow was no longer alone. Other Vexnar had started coming out of the forest. At first they stayed far back in the trees watching carefully. But as weeks passed and nothing bad happened, they came closer. Now there were 5 Vexnar who visited regularly. Shadow had brought his family. There was a smaller Vexnar that was Shadow's child, and 2 others that seemed to be Shadow's mate and sibling. The language experts had made great progress. They had created a computer program that could translate between Vexnar and human languages. It was not perfect yet, but it worked well enough for basic communication. Through this translator, the galaxy learned the truth about the Vexnar. The Vexnar were not aggressive by nature. They were a peaceful people who valued family and art. They created beautiful sculptures from stone and arranged plants in patterns that had meaning. They told stories to their children about the stars and the forests. They had laws and traditions that went back thousands of years. Every conflict in the historical records had been a misunderstanding. When other species had arrived on Vexnar worlds, the Vexnar had tried to communicate. But their size and appearance had frightened the visitors. The visitors had run away or attacked. The Vexnar had defended themselves. And then everyone had assumed the Vexnar were monsters. Through Shadow, the Vexnar shared their history with the galaxy. They explained that they had names for all the species that had feared them. The names were sad. They translated to things like the ones who run, the ones who shoot first, and the ones who never stay to listen. The Vexnar had wanted to make friends. They had tried over and over. But fear had always won. Lucas spent his afternoons not just with Shadow anymore, but with the whole Vexnar family. Shadow's child was curious and playful, much like Lucas himself. The 2 young ones would play games together while the adults watched. Sometimes human children from the station's other families would join. It was strange to see human and Vexnar children playing together, but it also felt right. Helen watched her son teach a group of young Vexnar how to play tag. They had to modify the rules because Vexnar had 6 legs and could run much faster than humans. But they figured it out together, laughing and making happy sounds in their different languages. It was proof that friendship could cross any divide. The Galactic Council had changed its policies completely. The old protocols about Vexnar were thrown away. New protocols were written, based on peaceful contact and respect. The Council sent messages to all known Vexnar populations, asking for a chance to start over. Some Vexnar were suspicious. They had been hurt too many times. But others were willing to try. Ambassador Patricia Green visited the station for a special ceremony. She had worked hard to make peace between the galaxy and the Vexnar. Today, the Council was officially recognizing the Vexnar as a member species. Shadow would represent his people in the Council chambers. Patricia found her nephew sitting with Shadow at the edge of the forest. The observation dome's walls had been removed months ago. There was no need for barriers anymore. Lucas was showing Shadow a book about Earth's history. Shadow listened carefully, occasionally asking questions through the translator device. "Lucas, your friend is going to be very important now," Patricia said as she sat down next to them. "Shadow will speak for all Vexnar in the Council. Are you okay with that? It means Shadow might not be able to visit as often." Lucas thought about this seriously. Then he smiled. "That is okay, Aunt Patricia. Shadow needs to help his people. That is more important than playing with me. But Shadow will still visit sometimes, right?" Shadow used the translator to respond. His deep voice came through the small speaker. "I will always visit, young Lucas. You are my first friend among the humans. You saw past fear when no one else could. I will not forget that." The ceremony that afternoon was broadcast across the entire galaxy. Representatives from every council species attended. They watched as Shadow stood before them and spoke about his people's hopes for peace. Shadow talked about the importance of looking past appearances. He talked about how one small human child had changed everything by simply being kind. When Shadow finished speaking, Lucas stepped forward. He was nervous. There were so many important people watching, but he had something he wanted to say. The council had given him special permission to speak. "My name is Lucas," he began. His voice was small but clear. "I am 7 years old. When I first saw Shadow, I was not scared. I did not know I was supposed to be scared. I just saw someone interesting. Someone I wanted to know. Maybe that is the lesson. Maybe we should stop teaching people to be scared of things that are different. Maybe we should teach them to be curious instead." The chamber was completely silent. Then slowly the aliens began to show their approval. Some clapped. Some made chirping sounds. Some glowed brighter. Each species had their own way of showing agreement, but the message was the same. A child had spoken wisdom that adults had forgotten. Ambassador Krell approached Lucas after the ceremony. His scales were a bright, happy yellow. "Young human, you have taught us all an important lesson. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is not to fight. Sometimes the bravest thing is to stay and say hello. You did that and you changed the galaxy." Lucas shrugged. "I just made a friend. That is all." "Is that really so special?" Krell laughed, a sound like wind through chimes. "Yes, young one. That is exactly what makes it special. You did not see a threat or a problem. You just saw a potential friend. That is a gift." 6 months after that first meeting, life had settled into a new normal. Shadow visited twice a week now, always bringing his family. The research station had expanded into a proper embassy. Vexnar and humans worked together, learning from each other and building understanding. Other species had started reaching out to Vexnar populations on different worlds. It was slow work. Many Vexnar were still suspicious after years of violence, but gradually connections were being made. The Vor, who had lost so much to conflicts with Vexnar, had even sent an apology. They admitted that they had shot first without trying to communicate. The Vexnar accepted the apology. They understood that fear makes people do terrible things. Helen completed her research and published a paper that became required reading at every diplomatic school in the galaxy. The paper was called Understanding Through Innocence. It explained how children could see past prejudice because they had not yet learned to be afraid. It suggested that first contact situations should include children, if their parents agreed, because children approached new situations with curiosity rather than fear. Lucas grew older, but he never forgot those first afternoons with Shadow. When he was a teenager, he decided he wanted to be a diplomat. He wanted to help other species learn to communicate, just like he and Shadow had learned. Shadow supported this decision and even offered to teach Lucas more about Vexnar culture and language. On the 1-year anniversary of their first meeting, Lucas and Shadow sat together at the forest's edge watching the purple sunset. They did not need words anymore. The translator sat unused between them. They had learned each other's languages well enough to communicate directly. Lucas spoke in Vexnar, his pronunciation much better now. "Do you remember when I first waved at you? Were you scared of me?" Shadow's response was in English, still imperfect but understandable. "I was curious. You were so small, so fragile, but you showed no fear. That made me want to know you. Most species run or attack. You stayed and waved. That changed everything." Lucas smiled. "I am glad I stayed. You are my best friend, Shadow, and you are mine, young Lucas. You taught the galaxy to look past fear. That is a great gift." Above them, ships from a dozen different species orbited peacefully. In the council chambers, Vexnar and other species worked together to solve problems. On worlds across the galaxy, children were learning that different did not mean dangerous. The universe was changing one friendship at a time. And it had all started with a 7-year-old boy who decided to wave hello to a stranger in a purple forest. 5 years had passed since that first afternoon, when Lucas waved at Shadow through the observation dome window. The small research station had grown into a thriving city. Buildings of human design stood next to structures made in the Vexnar style. The purple forest had been carefully preserved, and now paths wound through it where both species could walk together. Lucas was 12 years old now. He was taller and his voice was changing, but his friendship with Shadow remained as strong as ever. Shadow was older too, with some gray starting to show in the plates along his back. But the amber eyes still glowed with the same warmth and intelligence that had first caught Lucas's attention. The city had become a model for the whole galaxy. It showed that different species could live together peacefully. Human children went to school with young Vexenar. They learned each other's languages and cultures. Human scientists worked with Vexenar artists and teachers. Everyone contributed something unique to the community. Other colonies had been established on different worlds where both species could coexist. The Vexenar were no longer seen as monsters. They had become valued members of the Galactic Council. Shadow served as the primary ambassador, traveling to different worlds to help establish peaceful contact. But Shadow always made time to return home to the Purple Forest. Home was where Lucas was. Home was where their friendship had begun. No matter how important Shadow's diplomatic work became, this place and this friendship remained the center of everything. Today was a special day. The Galactic Council was dedicating a monument at the site where Lucas and Shadow had first met. Representatives from every member species had traveled to attend the ceremony. The monument was a beautiful sculpture showing a human child and a Vexenar facing each other with raised hands, the moment of first peaceful contact frozen in stone. Lucas stood before the assembled crowd. He had been asked to give a speech, but he felt nervous. There were thousands of people watching, both in person and through broadcasts across the galaxy. His mother stood nearby, giving him an encouraging smile. Shadow stood on his other side, a steady presence. Taking a deep breath, Lucas began to speak. 5 years ago, I was just a kid who was bored with his homework. I looked out the window and saw something interesting in the forest. I did not know I was supposed to be afraid. I did not know about the history of conflict. I just saw someone I wanted to meet. So I waved. He paused, gathering his thoughts. Everyone says I was brave, but I was not trying to be brave. I was just being friendly. That is what I think we forget sometimes. We make everything complicated. We worry about protocols and safety and what might go wrong. Sometimes we just need to be simple. We need to be friendly. We need to give people a chance. Shadow stepped forward and spoke through the translation device, though his English was good enough now that he barely needed it. Lucas speaks truth, but he is too modest. What he did was brave, whether he knew it or not. He saw a creature that could have harmed him. Instead of running, he stayed. Instead of fearing, he welcomed. He chose connection over safety. That choice changed everything. The crowd listened in respectful silence. Shadow continued. My people were alone for so long. We tried to reach out to others, but fear always pushed us away. We began to believe that we would always be alone. Then a small human child waved at me and everything changed. Lucas did not just give friendship to me, he gave hope to my entire species. Ambassador Krell stood to speak next. His scales had faded with age, but his voice was still strong. I remember the day we received the first reports of this situation. I was terrified. I thought we were about to witness a tragedy. Instead, we witnessed a miracle. 2 species that should have been enemies became friends, and that friendship spread to become peace between all our peoples. He looked at Lucas and Shadow. You have taught us that our assumptions can be wrong. You have shown us that fear is not the only response to the unknown. You have proven that curiosity and kindness can overcome any obstacle. This monument will stand here for thousands of years, reminding future generations of the day when everything changed. After the ceremony, Lucas and Shadow walked together through the forest. They followed the familiar paths they had walked hundreds of times before. Young Vexenar and human children played in the trees around them, their laughter mixing in the air. Do you ever think about what would have happened if I had not waved that day? Lucas asked. What if I had been scared and run away? Shadow made a thoughtful rumbling sound. Then perhaps someone else would have made the connection eventually. Or perhaps not. We cannot know what might have been. We can only be grateful for what is. You waved, Lucas, that is what matters. That single gesture of friendship created ripples that spread across the galaxy. They reached their favorite spot, a clearing where they could see both the city and the forest. Lucas sat on a smooth rock while Shadow settled beside him. The purple trees swayed in the wind, and the 2 friends sat in comfortable silence. I am going to the Diplomatic Academy next year, Lucas said after a while. I want to help other species learn to communicate like we did. Mom says I have a talent for it. You do, Shadow agreed. You see people, not categories. You see individuals, not stereotypes. That is a rare gift, and the galaxy needs more people like you. I am proud of you, young friend. Lucas felt his eyes get wet. I learned from you too, Shadow. You taught me that being different does not mean being dangerous. You taught me that real friendship can cross any boundary. You taught me that patience and understanding can solve problems that weapons never could. They sat together as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of purple and orange. Around them, the city hummed with life. Humans and Vexnar going about their daily activities, living together in peace. Children playing games that combined rules from both cultures. Scientists collaborating on projects that benefited everyone. Helen found them there as darkness fell. She had been looking for Lucas to tell him that dinner was ready. But when she saw the two friends sitting together, she paused. She pulled out her camera and took a picture. This moment, she thought, this simple moment of friendship, was worth preserving. Later that night, as Lucas got ready for bed, he thought about everything that had happened. It had all started so simply. A boy, a window, and a wave. Nothing dramatic. Nothing planned. Just a moment of openness and curiosity, and from that small moment, an entire galaxy had changed. The Galactic Council had new protocols now. When encountering unknown species, the first response was not fear or aggression. It was curiosity and peaceful contact. Children were often included in first contact teams because they approached new situations without prejudice. Many conflicts had been avoided because someone chose to wave instead of attack. The Vexnar were thriving now. They had built new cities and reconnected with scattered populations across many worlds. They shared their art and their knowledge with the galaxy. They were no longer extinction-level predators in people's minds. They were artists, teachers, diplomats, and friends. As Lucas drifted off to sleep, he smiled. Tomorrow, he and Shadow would work together on a project for school. They were writing a guide for young people about how to approach first contact situations. The main lesson was simple. Be curious, be kind, be willing to see past the surface. Give friendship a chance. Outside, Shadow was walking back to his family's dwelling in the forest. His child asked him about the ceremony, about all the important people who had come. Shadow explained that yes, many important people had attended, but the most important people were not the diplomats or the leaders. The most important people were the ordinary ones who chose kindness over fear every single day. Years would pass. Lucas would grow up and become a famous diplomat, helping dozens of species establish peaceful contact. Shadow would age gracefully, eventually passing on his ambassador role to his own child. But their friendship would endure, a constant in a changing galaxy. The monument stood in the clearing exactly where that first meeting had happened. Visitors came from across the galaxy to see it. They would stand before the sculpture of a child and a Vexnar and remember the lesson: fear builds walls, curiosity builds bridges. A simple wave can change the universe. The galaxy had learned something precious from Lucas and Shadow. It had learned that the most dangerous thing in the universe was not an alien predator. The most dangerous thing was the assumption that different meant enemy. The most dangerous thing was letting fear make all the decisions. And so the story of Lucas and Shadow became a legend, told to children of every species. It was a story about courage, but not the courage of weapons and warfare. It was about the courage to stay when others would run, the courage to wave when others would hide, the courage to see a person where others saw only a monster. In the end, the galaxy was saved not by great warriors or brilliant scientists, but by a 7-year-old child who did not know enough to be afraid, who saw a stranger in a purple forest and decided to say hello. That simple choice had rippled outward, touching billions of lives, preventing countless conflicts, and bringing peace where there had been only fear. And somewhere, in a city where purple trees swayed in the wind and two species lived together in harmony, a boy and his best friend were already planning their next adventure, because that was what friends did. They